Hey everyone, welcome to week 29, day 4. This is Thursday. This is our ongoing Go Reds week. This is our push week. Like the Reds pushed through a wonderful season, weird season, but absolutely wonderful, brilliant. So this week we're trying to find ways in which we can push our subject matter. And not only our subject matter, but the way we feel about our subject matter and how we can translate the fact that we're being moved by some aspect of our subject matter into painting. So that's what we're going to concentrate. Today, we are going to bring back some of the elements that we did on Monday with Danny's painting. You know, she was preparing some soup. It's going to be over here somewhere. And we're going to push those even further. So I think that's going to be super cool. Okay, let's get started. Now, for today, we're going to go back to the definition of pushing that we sort of established in the first day of this week with the Monday painting. In that Monday painting, I was trying to see if I could just find something that was inherent to the kind of original pose that Danny was taking and seeing if I could dissect those elements and if I could push those elements and what would happen to the way we would read the result of that distortion and how it would affect and compare to the original pose. It was a lot of fun just noticing that the relationship even between the space and the figure was actually affected too while I was painting it and realizing that the choreography between the shapes of the things that were disposed in space were actually generating new relationships between themselves and the figure. I noticed that, I could start pushing this. So I started changing the angles slightly and it was a lot of fun. I think that eventually what is amazing about starting to distort something is that the initial set of rules, the initial set of relationships that are part of the harmonious nature of what we observe are now just all going into different directions. And we can just start reconfiguring our image. And the most important thing about piecing this new puzzle is to realize that we can make the image head into new directions. And those directions don't have to be congruous with our original image, with what was originally there in nature. We don't have to be faithful to that initial set of rules. We can actually reestablish those rules in the image while we're making it. And I think that that's when our painting feels alive. Many times when we are replicating nature or when we have a very, very specific set of instructions that we follow when we make a painting, we can anticipate what the painting is going to look like. And I have felt that, and I know painters that have felt that. And this is not to say that a painting that is constructed that way doesn't have achievements and doesn't go through incredibly challenging moments. And it's highly commendable when those artists are able to surmount all those challenges. There is something entirely different when you don't really know what direction you're taking the painting to, and you have to pave the way as you are painting the painting. And it is amazing because there is a heightened sense of almost every single choice mattering in your painting. So it's not this thing where you kind of know where you're headed and you can kind of recognize how your painting practice is constructed and you can say, well, I usually do an underdrawing, then I do a kind of sepia drawing with diluted paint where I mass in my shadows, and then I do a dead layer of paint, or I do a grayed down version, a less saturated version of what the painting is going to look like. And then I start to reestablish my darks. And then I kind of more thoroughly develop my forms and model into very fine detail, those moments where I want my attention to be in. What I just described there is usually how a traditional painting is painted. But the thing is, if you do enough of those, you kind of already know where your painting is headed once you start your painting. If you know yourself, if you know what you're capable of, if you've painted 100 hands, you're just going to be painting another hand. And you're going to try to be consistent about the quality of the hand that you paint. This is difficult. I'm not going to say that this is not difficult. For example, for Bouguereau to maintain that consistency and that quality, I mean, that is absolute genius. That is absolutely amazing. And I'm sure he had to be in love of the way he painted, and he had to truly, truly believe in the manner in which he painted for him to just always be able to sit down and say, wow, I'm going to model this thigh for, the next week, and I'm going to love every single moment of it. In my case, and I have to be, super honest about it, there was a point in my career where it started bothering me. And I remember exactly the paintings that I was painting. They were large paintings. They were about, not super large paintings, but they were about 80 by 60 inch paintings. And they were kind of like this physical, almost feat. When you're painting a large painting, your whole body is part of the painting process. Your shoulders are going to hurt, and you have to paint on a step ladder if you're painting up high. So it does involve some physical strain. And I remember one time I was painting, and I was tired, and I started thinking, I don't know if all this strain is worth it. My hand hurts, my elbow hurts, my shoulder hurts. All of this just to say that I kind of know where my painting is headed. Like, I probably was blocking in my painting, and I could envision what my painting was going to look like. And eventually, I could tell you, a month and a half later, that painting was kind of exactly what I was expecting. I developed a painting as far as I could take it, and I kind of knew what that looked like, and I knew what to expect of that. And the thing is, at that time, I was working for a gallery, and they also knew what to expect. I had given them probably 20 paintings, 20 large paintings before that. So they already knew and recognized what that standard was. And the people who had bought those previous paintings, they were already expecting that level of quality. So in many ways, you're kind of chained and tied to your previous efforts. And I remember just thinking, wow, this is all great and fun. And obviously there were paintings that I wanted to paint. So it wasn't like I was miserable. Nobody was forcing me to paint these paintings. But there was just something very sad about just being there, knowing all this effort to just kind of know what this painting is going to be. And I know a lot of painters that live for those moments, that it's just about execution. It's just about how well you can execute a painting. A painting becomes about the making of the painting. And I guess that's fine, and I guess that's like conquering something. And that's fine, but in many ways, it became boring for me. I'm not saying I was above it. I'm not saying, I was so good that it just wasn't exciting for me. No, I just, I have to be true to the artist that I am. And painting for me was so exciting. It felt like this creative act that was so alive that to drag that initial burst of energy that you feel when you realize you recognize what you want to paint and you start blocking something in, which to me is like the best moment of a painting. That's the most exciting moment of a painting. To then drag that, a month and a half or 2 months just so you can have this final image, to me it was just boring. And I know many people say, well, that's where the genius part of painting is. Anybody can have an idea, anybody can kind of block it in, but if you finish it, if you truly finish it and it becomes this precious thing, then that's where a painting is. I don't know. I don't agree with that. And to me, the part where you're just at your easel, working away, that's something that we all can kind of do, but that's also something that can become quite mindless if we're not very, very careful. And what was happening to me is that I was feeling that it was becoming this mindless act, this thing that you would just sit down and just work. It almost felt like office-like. The one thing that I never wanted my life to be like was to feel like I was part of this office environment where you just show up and you follow like a routine every single day, and you have to sit down and you already know what to expect and you just punch in, punch out, and next day is going to be the same thing. I never wanted my life to be that. I wanted to be excited every single time I sit down to paint. And I remember I just wasn't getting that when I was caught up in just making these paintings that were essentially just products, products that people were expecting. I had created this level of expectancy that I had to meet every single time I sat down and painted. So when I got bored, I said, well, what can I do? What can I do to make this exciting for me? And the one thing that I realized that I could do was just to be vague, was just to not know, to be uncertain, to almost embrace uncertainty and say, what if I just take my painting to a place that I don't recognize? That would give me a ton of anxiety, but it also made me feel alive again. It made me feel like as I was painting, I was just making these very, very important and fresh and just super relevant decisions to the painting that could take them somewhere that was incredibly exciting or that could totally ruin everything. And I loved it. I loved that there was just this enormous sense of responsibility with what I was doing, with every single choice that I was making. But it wasn't so much so that they would weigh heavily on me and I would feel like they were impossible to handle. I would feel like the choices that I was trying to make were unbearable because of the weight that they carried. No, this was just more about enjoying painting again. And I think that part of enjoying painting again also meant I've painted a head 100 times. I've done 100 times this same exercise. I know what to expect. I kind of know exactly what that head is going to look like. But if I kind of told myself, what if you painted in ways that you have never painted that head? What if you gave yourself a chance to just say, well, I haven't really approached it in this manner. Let's see what happens. And I guess that granting myself that right to just say, let's see what happens, was one of the most important things that I could ever do. Because at that moment in my career, and I'm speaking maybe about, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, 10 years ago, painting was becoming something predictable, and painting was becoming something that, even though it was incredibly satisfying in the sense that I was doing well, it was kind of feeling empty for me. I think that the initial energy that it came from the moment the idea was just generated and I attacked the painting, all that energy was just exhausted. It was probably there for the first couple of days, but then it was gone. So to try and extend something that is just slowly kind of phasing out, and to extend it over a period of time, I know there's people that take years to do a painting, but regularly you can do a pretty amazing painting if you paint for 2 months. I mean, if you're painting almost every day for 2 months, that's a crazy amount of work. That is an insane amount of work. If you're painting for 9 hours a day and you're painting for 6 days a week, 2 months is an eternity. And I'm sure that paintings sometimes take way more than that. I totally understand that. But I'm just saying, as a general rule, if something is escaping you and you just can't get a firm grasp on what you're doing, after working so many hours, then just start another painting and go back to it after some time has gone by. So I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying that it was perhaps vitally important for me to almost redefine the way I painted and to make it exciting for myself once again. And one of the things that made it exciting for me was just having fun. And I know that sometimes people say, oh, come on, art is something that has to be taken seriously. Painting is something where you have to suffer your whole life. Painting is highly intellectual, highly philosophical. There's no room for saying, you know what, I'm just going to wing it and I'm just going to have fun and see what happens. And if I can be honest, that's exactly what I did. I started doing things just because I thought they were cool, because I thought they looked fun, because I loved the way they looked when they were weird. I just told myself, I don't have to answer to anyone. Why am I going to feel bad if I want to make some dumb little joke inside a painting just to appease me, just to feel like, hell yeah, this is fun for me again. So I started doing that, and among the things that I would do is just push and distort. And I remember a couple of years ago, I took one of the things that I love, which is sports, and a sport that I super enjoy watching, which is boxing, and I mixed the two of them. And I said, I'm going to do some boxing paintings because I actually absolutely love this sport. I love these beasts of human beings that decide that there are going to be these set rules, but ultimately your goal is just to beat the crap out of the person that's in front of you. So in essence, I think it's us as animals, it's our most savage side, but it's also our most sophisticated side where we can actually be humans and say, yeah, we're going to kill each other, but there's rules to this. Boxing is one of the most demanding sports in terms of the mechanics of your body. These are incredibly well-oiled machines. Phenomenal boxers throughout time have these incredible bodies that they understand perfectly, and they understand boxing almost like a dance. People that don't really understand boxing, they just see it as two people just wailing at each other, and it is not aimless at all. There is so much structure to this sport. What if I just take all that structure away and just make it bizarre looking and just, start exaggerating a bunch of things that would be absolutely ridiculous about it and just make it so wonky that it just goes against the very nature of what boxing means. And I started, stretching limbs and just making heads super big. I started repeating patterns. Those images were so much fun. And if I ever tried to justify them, I would just say, dude, that's just something that I like. I love sports. I've always had no shame in saying that the one thing that I love as much as art in my life is watching football, real football. And one of the sports that I also enjoy watching is boxing. So this is just something that is incredibly personal. I'm going to paint this, have fun with it, and start pushing and doing tons of weird things with these bodies that are perfectly balanced. Even though if you think of old George Foreman, you're not going to think of the body of a boxer. But even then, even old boxers are just absolutely magical. And I'm going to take that. I'm going to take all that knowledge that they possess, and I'm just going to put everything on its head and say, I can turn this into an incredibly wobbly, fragile thing. And to be honest, I had so much damn fun doing those paintings that I could do those paintings for the rest of my life, I think. I would love to do more of those paintings because I had an absolute blast every single time I painted one of those. I think that the painting of my mother today, it's building upon what I was speaking about at the beginning, which is I understand how as soon as you change a tiny part of the whole, then the whole just has to be rearranged. It's not like you can keep all the other sets of relationships and just change one tiny part. No, that tiny part almost becomes like a domino and it just takes down everything. I loved that responsibility of having to reconstruct everything once you decide that you can change something, but the extent in which you change it is just something that you can enjoy enormously, and that's what I wanted to do today. At the beginning of the week, I saw Danny and I said, I can make this head kind of sharper and longer and just really, really push the verticality of that spine, and then just the broadness of the shoulder. I could push it sideways and then, make that hand really big when compared to the head. And today I was like, well, let's just take that further. Let's just introduce my mother's head to Giacometti and just really elongate it and take that hand and just push the crap out of it and just make the difference between those two just really, really big. So big that it just almost feels ridiculous and uncomfortable. And as soon as you cross that threshold, you go like, you know what? I'm already here. Why don't you just enjoy it? Kind of reminds me of, when you don't have an umbrella, or maybe you do, but it's just pouring outside. At some point, you are so damn wet that you stop caring. I'm either going to be just very wet or completely drenched. But there's no difference between those two. There really isn't. You're still going to have to change your clothes when you get home. So I think in a way, that's the mentality that you have to have when you're pushing something. Once you cross that sort of invisible barrier where on one side things make sense and then on the other side is like no man's land. It's like we don't really know what rules apply here. Once you cross that threshold, then just have fun. Enjoy it. Just push things, try things out, because who knows? Who knows what's going to work? Maybe everything that you do works. Maybe nothing works. Maybe it's a complete disaster. But it doesn't matter anymore because you're there. You crossed it. You're drenched. So might as well enjoy it. And I think that was today's painting. I was willing to do what I did almost naturally on Monday's painting and say, you know what? Let's make it ridiculous. Let's grant ourselves the right to enjoy it. And the reason? Well, just because. Honestly, that is the best reason of all. I wish that painters and other artists would just answer like that sometimes. Why did you do this? Oh, just because I wanted to. Just because I wanted to. That's all there is to it. That's how I paint a ton of my paintings. I don't know if that makes me a lesser painter, but I'll tell you what, I enjoy my paintings like hell. So that to me is a life worth living. That was it for today. We're only missing one day in this push week, which will be tomorrow, where again, we're going to try to do something a little bit different. And hopefully it's something that can link with what we're going to do next week. So I'll see you guys tomorrow and we'll see how we do. Bye.